Greetings, Summoner! In this video we're going to talk about the best solo queue champions in patch 8.21. There are very few significant changes in this patch, so we'll have a look at the patch changes and the champions we'd recommend playing in solo queue to raise your rating. We shall discuss not only the strongest champions for every role, but also some others. This tier list is made for platinum players and lower. Many S tier champions do not have any complex mechanics and suit both experienced players and beginners. So let's start with the top lane. There are minor top lane changes in this patch, just a little Irelia nerf. In S tier there are still 3 bruisers who are extremely strong in solo queue, and 1 tank, Cyan. All these bruisers have a high snowball potential, which makes them strong solo queue champions. After gaining a lane advantage, it will be very easy to snowball it, leaving the enemy team almost no chances of stopping you. Besides the S tier champions, another hero worth noting is Wukong, who has a high win rate not only in the top lane, but also in the jungle. Alright, let's start with Darius. In patch 8.21, Darius remains one of the strongest solo queue top laners. He doesn't have such mobility or gap closers as Irelia and Jax. Till Darius gets level 6, it's quite easy to kill him together with your jungler. This champion is very strong in early 1v1 fights. And after level 6, he can turn enemy ganks around and kill 2 champions by himself. In the mid to late game, unlike Irelia or Jax, Darius is extremely strong in teamfights, mostly because of his ultimate and his engage potential with Flash plus E combo. Darius is good for both skilled players and beginners. Next, Irelia, who's got slightly nerfed in this patch and received -5 MS to her stats. This change is very insignificant for top lane Irelia and is unlikely to affect her potential. Irelia has a great mobility, a stun and a gap closer, all of which allow her to make effective trades in lane and set up ganks for her jungler. In the mid to late game, she is mostly split pushing, but can also help her team if necessary. We'd recommend Irelia to experienced players as she has a few quite complex mechanics. Now, Jax. He's quite similar to Irelia. In lane, he has a stun and a gap closer. Jax is especially good against champions who deal the main damage with basic attacks. In the mid to late game, his main task is split pushing, but just as Irelia, he can rotate to his team to help them. This champion could suit both advanced players and beginners. Cyan is an excellent top laner for solo queue matches. He has a few popular builds. The main ones are damage and tank builds. With a damage build, you'll be dealing tons of damage both with your abilities and with AAs. This build is more suitable for advanced players. And tank Cyan will be useful regardless of whether he's ahead or behind. Cyan's ultimate allows him to initiate teamfights. In solo queue, players often make different mistakes, and Cyan can successfully punish them for it. In lane, he has a decent wave clear. After level 6, Cyan can easily set up top lane ganks for his jungler. Besides, he can rotate to the other lanes and help his teammates by ganking enemies with the ultimate. Aggressive champions still dominate the jungle. In patch 8.21, Ivern gets his portion of buffs. He was often picked already in patch 8.20, now, after the buff, we're gonna see this champion in solo queue much more often. Another minor buff goes to Zac. All the S tier champions have a snowball potential, which makes them perfect for solo queue. Your playstyle on these champions should be aggressive. Try to gank as often as you can and farm only if necessary. Graves has been one of the strongest solo queue junglers for several patches in a row. He clears the jungle pretty fast and is a great counter jungler. To earn more gold, he can either farm his and enemy jungle camps or go for numerous ganks. The latter is best for solo queue, as players there often make macro mistakes. Graves is highly dependent on his items, so it is important for you to gain an advantage early on to start dealing tons of damage in the mid to late game. Graves can either build full damage or bruiser. This champion has no complex mechanics in his kit and suits both beginners and experienced junglers. Our next champion is Nidalee. In the right hands, she becomes a very strong champion both in low and high tier games. But if you can't play Nida, better practice in normal games first and only after that join ranked games and climb up the ladder. Nidalee's strong point is her early game. Mobility and fast jungle clear allow her to make many early ganks and snowball or even win the game. Besides, Nidalee is a great counter jungler. When playing against weak early game junglers, she can simply destroy them without letting even make it to the mid game. Camille's jungle clear isn't that good at all. However, her ganks are extremely effective starting from level 2. She's especially strong against immobile champions. Camille greatly depends on her items, and it is very important for her to buy Trinity Force in time. In the early game, try to gank as often as possible. Camille has a high duel potential against most meta junglers, but if something goes wrong, you can always avoid the fight by using her re-ability. After level 6, Camille's ganks get on the next level. It won't even matter whether or not your target has escape abilities, the Hextech Ultimatum won't let them get away. Camille is good for both advanced players and beginners. Xin Zhao is a perfect choice for jungle rookies. He's got a nice jungle clear and a high gank potential. Besides, winning a duel against Xin is very difficult for most junglers. Because of that, Xin Zhao is very good at controlling the river, the crabs and the vision around the river. In the early game, Xin can make effective ganks already at level 2. Just with a few core items, Xin Zhao can focus enemy tanks and protect his carries, or just break into the enemy backline and try to delete enemy squishes. We highly recommend Xin Zhao for beginners, but he's also a great choice for experienced junglers. In the mid lane, Zoe gets buffed. This buff mostly aims at her mid to late game potential, and Irelia's slight nerf should once again be noted. When it comes to the mid lane, this nerf is way more significant for Irelia. It's important for her to be mobile, as she's almost always matched against ranged champions. So in the mid lane, we have 3 mages with a great wave clear and powerful ultimates. Lissandra and Malzahar will be very useful during ganks and teamfights. Besides those 3 mages, there are Kassadin and Irelia in S tier. Kassadin is a melee mage assassin, who's good against most mages. Irelia is a bruiser with a high solo queue potential, but she requires an excellent mechanical skill. So let's start with Lissandra. In lane, she has a great wave clear. Besides, her get close and crowd control make it easy to set up ganks, especially after level 6. Her ultimate can also serve as a safe tool for Lissandra. Her strong point is teamfights. All of her abilities deal AoE damage, so better fight in narrow spaces. Lissandra has no complex mechanics and can suit both rookies and pros. Malzahar is a perfect champion for beginners. In lane, he has an excellent wave clear, but of course Malzahar's ultimate remains his strong point. It allows him to do both, set up ganks for his jungler and be extremely useful in teamfights. His flash plus ultimate combo is fairly peerless. In lane, avoid aggressive plays when you have no passive shield. After level 6, you should ask your jungler for help and wait for a gank, or just push the lane and rotate to one of the side lanes to help your teammates. In the late game, Malzahar deals sufficient damage to tanks and squishes. This champion is perfect for beginners and has no difficult mechanics. Cassiopeia's strength in lane directly depends on your ability to hit skill shots. She has no fast wave clear but is a great duelist. In lane, you can play aggressively from the very first levels. Due to that, you can easily control your lane and help your allies in the jungle or in the side lanes. In the mid to late game, Cassiopeia will be very useful in teamfights, as she has AoE damage and an awesome ultimate. This champion isn't that easy to play, so pick her only if you feel confident enough in your skills. Kassadin is a counterpick to many mages in the game, but you shouldn't pick him if you don't know who your opponent is. Kassadin unlocks his potential in the mid to late game. Till level 6, his laning phase is below average. He mostly farms and pokes his enemies with Q every now and then. His wave clear is quite poor, so your opponent will easily push the lane. As a result, you'll lose the lane priority. Till level 6, Kassadin is really vulnerable to enemy ganks, but once you get the ultimate, use it wisely, so that you don't get punished by the enemy jungler for excessive aggression. Kassadin is relatively difficult to play, as you need to understand mid lane matchups and be able to play passively early on. Nevertheless, we recommend him for both beginners and skilled players, as mastering this champion is not really that difficult. Irelia is one of the few bruisers that are played in the mid lane. -5 movement speed in this patch will affect mid lane Irelia much more than the top lane one. Mid lane Irelia is played more aggressively and her mobility really matters. Till level 6, Irelia isn't that strong and mostly tries to farm and punish her opponent for their blunders. The ultimate greatly increases her kill potential in lane. Irelia has crowd control and tons of damage, so she can easily set up ganks for her jungler. In the mid to late game, you can either split push or play with your team. In the bot lane, Kai'Sa gets nerfed. Nevertheless, she remains a strong solo queue marksman in high tiers. In lower tiers, Kai'Sa is much harder to implement, as she needs items to be useful. Also, Ashe and Ezreal have got slightly buffed. In S tier, we still have 3 marksmen and a mage. Miss Fortune doesn't use basic attacks that often, and mostly deals damage with her abilities, and the ultimate makes this champion especially useful. While Kai'Sa and Xayah are auto-attackers with quite interesting mechanics. And Swain is a mage, but still he's very strong in solo queue, especially when played with aggressive supports. So let's start with Miss Fortune. There are 2 different styles to play this champion. In the first case, you max Q and pick Dark Harvest Keystone. This choice is good for a strong mid to late game, where you'll be dealing tons of damage with your Q ability. In the second case, you max E and pick Arcane Comet Keystone. This choice is more suitable for early game poke and minion wave control. Regardless of your keystone choice, Miss Fortune will remain a powerful marksman due to her ultimate ability, mainly in teamfights. This champion is a nice pick for both beginners and skilled players. Xayah is a perfect ADC for solo queue. Due to her ultimate, you can escape from dangerous situations all by yourself. Also, Xayah has her own crowd control and impressive damage, which make her very useful in teamfights. In lane, she feels great with aggressive supports with crowd control. Of course, the best support for Xayah is Rakan, but other supports can also complement this powerful marksman. Let's say Morgana, Alistar or Zyra. Kai'Sa is the most difficult champion in this tier. She reaches her power spike in the mid to late game. Kai'Sa is a legit hyper carry who can destroy the whole team when she has the necessary items. In lane, she mostly farms. Kai'Sa is really item dependent, so it's important to avoid any mistakes so that you don't lose your advantage further on. Kai'Sa works best with defense supports such as Lulu, Janna, Morgana and others. In teamfights, try to attack the closest targets and don't make risky moves so that you don't get killed. Swain, unlike the other champions in this tier, is a mage. Most of the mages that were often picked in the bot lane before have left the meta, which means that Swain is one of the strongest mages in the bot lane. He has crowd control and impressive damage. He works best with aggressive supports with initiation and crowd control abilities. In teamfights, Swain deals tons of damage to multiple targets. This champion isn't difficult to master, so we recommend him not only for experienced players, but also for beginners. As for supports, since Alistar's got nerfed in this patch, now he takes his place in A tier. In solo queue, support roles are mostly taken by aggressive champions with engage and crowd control abilities. We have 2 of those in our tier. Besides them, in S tier there is Morgana, who counters many aggressive supports with crowd control. Also, Morgana herself can play aggressively in most matchups and provide a lane advantage for her carry. We would also note Thresh and Tahm Kench, who got buffed in this patch. So now we'll probably see them on the pro scene and in solo queue games more often. So let's start with Rakan, who has been popular in solo queue and professional games for quite a long time. He has mobility, sustain, and one of the best engage tools in the game. His ultimate allows him to crowd control up to 5 enemy targets, thus letting his allies kill them in a split second. In lane, Rakan can poke his opponent with Q. This champion is rather difficult to play and will suit experienced players. Pyke is the most difficult champion in our S tier. His playstyle is absolutely different from other supports. He has a reliable engage and crowd control. In addition, Pyke deals high AoE damage with the ultimate, which is especially useful in teamfights. This champion is quite difficult to master, so pick him at your own risk. Morgana is a counterpick to many aggressive supports with crowd control, including those from our S tier. In lane, she can either play passively, trying to protect herself and her ADC with the E ability, or she can play aggressively, trying to hit the enemies with Q and force a trade. In teamfights, Morgana is strong due to her ultimate, especially after she gets Zhonya's. This champion suits not only skilled players but also beginners. Alright guys, so this is it for now. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, we'll try to make more of those in the future. Adapt to the meta and don't be afraid of trying new champions. So as always guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and good luck in your solo queue.